So in this video, I'll show you how to crochet this demonic moth. I recently made another video on how to crochet a cute moth, and that kind of inspired me to create something even more kind of fantasy themed. So that's what I came up with. I also created different versions of this moth, and yeah, this is the demonic moth, and it has 2 horns. Also, I used a puff stitch for a kind of fluffy collar, and that's what the moth looks like. So yeah, let's start. First, you'll need yarn in different colors, 2 to 4 colors to be exact. I'd recommend using 2 colors for the main body, and then optionally you can also add 2 more colors for details and, you know, depending on what you want your finished project to look like. Then scissors, yarn needles, 2 even ends, a hook. Mine is a 2.3 millimeter hook, but you can also use a 2.5 millimeter hook. Depending on a hook size, the finished result will be a bit bigger or smaller. So that's that. And then also safety eyes. Mine are about 1 centimeter big. And stuffing. And that's it. So we'll be starting from the top here. And the first round will be a magic ring of 6 stitches. So I take my yarn and I wrap it around my fingers like so. Then I go through here and work 6 stitches into this ring or loop. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's it. And then I close it. And that's my magic ring. Just an FYI, I work in finished rounds, so that means I join each round with a slip stitch and then I start the next round by chaining 1. So that would be, I kind of join here, go through the first stitch of the magic ring, do a slip stitch, and then I chain 1. And then I would continue with the next round. But you can also work in continuous rounds, it doesn't really matter, it's up to personal preference. The disadvantage with this method is that you will see a kind of small seam, so you can see it here, but I personally don't really mind, and I kind of like with this method that you can kind of keep track of the rounds, and it's easier to kind of count stitches and keep your rounds organized. You kind of always know exactly where each round starts and ends, and I like that. And I don't really want to use a stitch marker, but it's really up to you. So that's just an FYI. In the next round, we work 6 increases, but in 2 different colors. So we work 6 increases and 1 increase in white, then 3 increases in black, and then 2 increases in white again. So to do that, I start with my first increase. So I'll work a single crochet in the first stitch, then another single crochet, so that it's an increase. And before I pull through, I attach my second color. So in this case, it's black. Where is the end? Here it is. So I attach it, and I don't pull through with the white yarn, but I pull through with the black yarn. And as you can see, I still have 2 stitches in white, and now I can continue with the black yarn. Now I continue by working 3 increases in black. So that's my first increase, second increase, third increase. And again, before I finish the third increase, before I pull through, I switch to white again for the last 2 increases. Now I continue in white. So that's the 5th, and that's the 6th increase. And that's the second round. Now I finish my round by working a slip stitch in here, and then I chain 1 to start my next round. In the third round, we are going to work a single crochet and then increase all the way around. So I start with my white yarn and I work a single crochet in here, and then an increase into the second stitch. And again, before pulling through, I switch to my black yarn and I go through here. And then I continue in black, so that's a single crochet, increase, single crochet, increase, single crochet, increase, switch to white again, and finish my round. Now you should have 18 stitches, and it will continue in the fourth round. To continue, work 2 single crochet in white, followed by an increase in white as well, and then I switch to black. Work 2 single crochet in black, and then an increase. And now we start creating this pattern here in the front. So we need a single white single crochet in the center of the black section. So to create that, I add another single crochet. Before pulling through, I switch to white. Then you should end up in the center of the black section, and I add another single crochet, another one in black, so that's 3 single crochets in the front here. And now we are left with 3 stitches in black, and we'll work an increase followed by 2 single crochets and switch to white. Now an increase and 2 single crochets, another increase and 2 single crochet. So I close here and start my next round. So that's the end, or the finished round 4. Now in round 5 we continue with 3 single crochet and an increase in white first. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I switch to black, and now I continue with 2 single crochet, an increase, and 2 single crochet until I reach the white stitch. And right before the white stitch I switch to my white yarn again, and I work an increase into this stitch here. And then I switch back to black. Two single crochet, an increase, and another 2 single crochet. I switch back to white, and now I continue with an increase, 5 single crochet, four, 5, now an increase and single crochet into the last 2 remaining stitches. And then I finish my round. So that's round 5. For round 6 and 7, we won't be needing any increases or decreases. So you basically just single crochet all around. However, in the front, we want to create this white pattern here, which means that in round 6 and 7, you want to make sure to switch to your white yarn in the front center for 6 stitches. So you basically single crochet until you reach 2 stitches before the white stitches here. So that will be here. And then you work 3 single crochet in white. So 1, 2, 3, and then another 3 single crochet in white. And then you end up with 6 stitches here in the front. So this is what your finished round 6 and 7 should look like. And now for round 8 and 9, we continue working 30 single crochets all around. But in the front, we only want to work 4 white single crochet. So basically you single crochet in white, then in black until you reach this stitch here. So you crochet a black stitch here instead of a white stitch. And then you continue with 4 white stitches, and then you switch to black stitches and white single crochets, and that's pretty much it for round 8 and 9. So 2 rounds. So this is the finished round 9. You see that we slowly start seeing this pattern here. And now we want to start decreasing to shape our head. For that, we work 3 single crochets followed by a decrease in white. So that's 1, 2, 3. And then my decrease, so I like to work invisible decreases, which means I insert my hook here in the front loop. And in the second front loop of the 2 stitches, I want to decrease into 1 stitch. Then I pull through my yarn and I end up with 1 stitch. Though before pulling through here, we want to switch to the black yarn. There you go. And now we work 5 single crochets in black. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Switch to white. And we work 2 decreases in white. So basically our 4 white stitches will end up being 2 white stitches. Again, invisible decreases. So I insert my hook in the front loop. That's the first decrease, and then the second decrease. Though before pulling through, I switch to black. And then I work 5 single crochets in black. 4 and 5. Switch back to white. Then I work a decrease here, followed by 3 single crochets. It's 1, 2, and 3. A decrease. Single crochet, decrease, and single crochet. And I finish around 10. So that's it. So basically we worked 4 decreases in white here and 2 decreases here. Now we are at round 11. We continue decreasing. So here in white we work 2 single crochets and a decrease. That's 1, 2 and a decrease. Sometimes a bit tricky to do these invisible decreases. Now it slipped through. There we go, and I switch to black. Now in black we work 3 single crochets, then a decrease, and then 2 single crochets. We don't switch back to white here. Basically the pattern here is finished. So that's 3 single crochets, a decrease, then 2 single crochets, a decrease, and 3 single crochets, 2 and 3. Switching back to white, and now I continue with a decrease, 2 single crochets, decrease, and another decrease. And then I finish my round. That's it. Now I should end up with 18 stitches. Now at the end of round 11 we should end up with 18 stitches, but we still want to get down to 12 stitches. So in round 12 we work a single crochet and a decrease in white, single crochet and decrease, switch to black, now again a single crochet, a decrease, single crochet, there was a loose strand but I'll fix that later, then a decrease, single crochet, decrease, and then another single crochet, switching to white, continue with a decrease, single crochet, and another decrease. And finish the round. Now we should end up with 12 stitches. So now we're done with the head, and we can add some stuffing and the safety eyes. So I'll add the eyes first because otherwise it's a bit hard to place the eyes when there's stuffing inside. And you want to place the eyes right below the 2 rows where you've got 6 stitches in white, so here, and that's coming from the top between row 8 and 9 approximately. So this is what the finished head looks like. I placed the eyes, and I also added the stuffing. Then I realized that the eyes are a bit too narrow. They could have been further apart, but I think it still looks cute, so I'll continue with this head. Now for the next row, which will be puff stitches in black, you want to switch to your black yarn, which I did at the end of my previous round. So basically I added a slip stitch with black yarn, pulled through and chained one, and now I'm ready for the next row, which will be in black. So for round 13, we want to create the collar using puff stitches. And basically we want to alternate between a puff stitch and a puff increase, which is basically just a puff stitch, like 2 puff stitches in the same stitch, until you end up with 18 stitches. So right now we've got 12 stitches here, and we alternate 6 times, and that should result in 18 stitches in total. And I'll warn you, this is a bit challenging because a puff stitch, you know, you kind of yarn over lots of times, and there's not a lot of space, especially for the increases, but it is possible. So yeah, so you yarn over for the first puff stitch. So this is just a normal puff stitch. I yarn over, insert my hook, pull through. That's the first. So now I've got 3 loops on my hook. Now I yarn over again, pull through. Now I've got 5 loops on my hook. And then I yarn over again, pull through, and now I should end up with 7 loops on my hook. And that's it. Basically you yarn over 3 times and then you pull through, and that's my first puff stitch. And in the next stitch I want to do a puff increase, so I do the same 2 times. So yarn over the second time, and I yarn over the third time, I pull through, and now, as I said, it's a bit challenging because there's not much space, but you want to do the same again. And the third time. Also make sure that when you yarn over and pull through, you kind of want to stretch it a bit so that you end up on the same height. So instead of, for example, you don't want to pull through here, because then the last loop here would be smaller than the others. So instead you want to make sure your tension is right, and then you pull through. And now we've got 3 puff stitches, and you pretty much continue this all around, alternate between a puff stitch and a puff increase until you reach the end of the round. Now I'm done with the puff stitches, and I started my second round here on the body by working 2 single crochets, an increase, then again 2 single crochets, an increase, then 1 single crochet and an increase, and now I'm switching to black, and I work 3 puff stitches in here. So that's the first puff stitch, then the second one, and the third one. I yarn over once, then I yarn over twice, and I yarn over again. And before pulling through, I switch to white to continue my round in white. Okay, so that's 3 puff stitches in the front. Now I continue in white, and I work an increase, a single crochet first, so that's, don't yarn over. I work and increase. It's kind of hard to find the stitches here. So that's the last one. Now this is the next one. That's just the front loop. Okay, so increase, single crochet, and now I continue with an increase to single crochet, an increase, and again single crochet. So increase to single crochet, increase, and single crochet. And then I finish round, I think it's round 14 now. And that's it. Now the 3 puff stitches should be in the front. You might have to adjust it a bit, but yeah, and also my eyes are not perfectly centered, but in general it should be in the front. Now I'm continuing with round 15, and for that we need 12 single crochets in white here, and then 1 puff stitch, and then another 11 single crochets here. So I start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now it slipped. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, then 12, so that's on top of the first puff stitch of the previous round. Then I switch to black, I yarn over, and before finishing the puff stitch we want to change to white again. And then I work 11 single crochets. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the last one. And I can finish my 15th round. Now for the 16th round, you want to work 24 single crochets all round. So basically you should have 24 stitches now, and you just want to work single crochets all round. So I finished round 16, and now we're gonna start decreasing in white only, which means we don't need the black yarn anymore. So that's why I cut it, and I'll tuck it in here. And to continue, we will work 2 single crochet, then a decrease, and repeat that 6 times. So I work a single crochet, another single crochet, then an invisible decrease, and that's pretty much it. And you want to repeat this 6 times. I finished round 17, and now we should end up with 18 stitches. And next, for round 18, we work 18 single crochets all around. So that's 1, 2, 3, and so on. In round 19, we continue with a single crochet and a decrease and repeat that 6 times. So that's a single crochet and an invisible decrease, and do that 6 times. So after finishing round 19, you should end up with 12 stitches. And now we work 12 stitches, so 12 single crochets all around. And then we add the stuffing. Also, don't worry about the front here. It might not look perfect, but we can fix that later when adding details. I finished round 20. This is what it looks like. It's just 12 single crochets. And now we can add the stuffing. I added the stuffing, and now we can close the body by decreasing 6 times. So basically you decrease all around. And to do that, I work invisible decreases. Like so. And using a yarn needle, I want to close the opening here, and I do so by so basically I only insert my yarn needle in the front loop of each stitch, and I do this all around, and then I can pull it close. Now it's closed. And then I weave in the end, like so. And that's it. Now we continue by adding details and fixing the parts that don't look perfect yet. So for example, here in the front, the puff stitches, they don't really look very neat. So we can fix that by adding some black yarn here. So now we can add some details. For that, I'm using a black yarn and a yarn needle. And I basically just, for example, close the gap here. Also in the back, I will kind of fix this open gap here. And then I continue with the head, and we want to add this little detail here and also the eyelids. I'm done with the front now, so the shape is a bit more neat. Also the back, there's no gap anymore. And now I'm continuing with the eyelids. For the eyelids, I insert my needle right next to the eye at about half height. Then I bring it out at the same height on the other side of the eye, so here. And when I pull the yarn through, it kind of naturally shapes around the eye and creates an eyelid effect. So that's the idea here. So I'm using the black yarn here. Obviously, you can also make an eyelid of a different color, so that's up to you. And I come up right next to the other eye, and that's it. Now you see there's this kind of eyelid shape. So now I'm done with the eyelids, and I want to add the cross. As you can see here, it starts in between the 2 white stitches, goes down to here, like in between the 2 eyes, and so I added the cross. And as I've mentioned before, my eyes should have been a bit further apart, so ideally you want to place them right next to the 4 white stitches, and that will leave you plenty of space to add the cross here. But yeah, that's That's the main body, and we can now continue with the rest of the moth. Now we continue with the horns, and for the horns I recommend working in continuous rounds, because if you work in finished rounds, the seam will show here, and that doesn't really look that great since the horns are so small. Usually I don't really mind the seam, but yeah, the horns are just a bit too small to work in finished rounds, so that's why. Let's start with the big horns. So the front horns here, which are kind of shaped like this. For that, I start with a magic ring of 8 stitches. Basically, we start at the bottom of the horn instead of at the top. So I create a magic ring. And I work 8 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I close it, and we can continue with the first round. Now we continue by working 8 single crochets into the back loop of each stitch. So I start here and inserting my hook in the back loop, I work a single crochet. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oh no, 7 and 8. And by working the single crochets into the back loop, you see that it creates this kind of edge, which is quite nice because that's what we want to achieve. We want our horn to be shaped like this, and that's just our basis. The 8, like the magic ring of the 8 stitches, will be our basis, and now we continue this way. Now you continue with 8 single crochets, and that's in both loops, so it's not just back loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now we start shaping the horn, and to do so you continue by working 2 decreases first and then a single crochet. So I always kind of use invisible decreases. So that's my first decrease, my second decrease. It's a bit challenging because the horn is quite small. So that's 2 decreases, then a single crochet, then 2 increases. That's 1 increase and a second increase. Now for the 5th row or round, you basically just repeat what you did for the previous round. So 2 decreases, a single crochet, 2 increases, and another single crochet. Now I'm done with the 5th round, and you see that it starts bending into a direction. So now to continue, we work 4 single crochets and then 2 decreases. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 decreases. And there are no increases in this round because we wanted to get a bit smaller towards the tip. So that's decrease and another decrease. And that's it. Now we continue with 2 increases and then 2 decreases. So we start with 2 increases. So that's increase number 1. Then the second increase. And now 2 decreases here. Decrease number 1. And that's the second decrease. It's really a bit challenging because it gets so small at the tip. Okay, then when you're done, repeat that round again. So again, 2 increases and then 2 decreases. Now when you're done with round 8, so I worked 2 increases and 2 decreases. We can continue with the last round, which is 2 single crochets and then 2 decreases. So you should end up with 4 stitches, which is very tiny. So 2 single crochet, that's 1, 2, and now 2 decreases. Decrease 1 and the second decrease. Now we're done with the first horn. Make another one so that you have 2 horns which can be placed here in the front. To finish off, I just simply cut the yarn here, and then I use a yarn needle to close the very small opening here and weave in the end. When you've woven in all the ends and you're done with the horn, you can kind of shape it a bit by pressing it like so, and then you sew it onto the head at the in the corner of the back section here at the top, and the tip should face outwards. Also, I didn't really use any stuffing because the horn is so small that it didn't really need any additional support. However, if you use a different yarn type, or your yarn is a bit thicker, or also your hook might be a different one, and in general, depending on the size of your project, you might want to add some stuffing for additional firmness. Now let's continue with the small horns. For that, I start with a magic ring of 6 stitches. And now I have the basis of my small horn, and like with the bigger horn, this is just a basis, and I start with the bottom first and work upwards. So now we want to continue by working 6 single crochets into the back loop of each of these stitches. So, and again in continuous rounds. So I continue here in the back loop and I work a single crochet, and you can do that all around. Now in round 3 we work 2 decreases and 2 increases. So we are done with the single crochets into the back loop, and we continue with 2 decreases. So that's the first decrease. Again, super tiny. And the second decrease. And now 2 increases. So there are 2 stitches left, and in each stitch we work an increase, which is really hard because it's so tiny. So that's the first increase. And now the second increase. And we're done with the third round. Now for round 4, we continue by working 2 decreases and then 2 single crochet. So again, super tiny, and this is even harder than the bighorn, but it is doable. So yeah, I start by working 2 decreases. That's the first decrease. Then the second decrease. And now, instead of 2 increases, like we did in the previous round, we just work a single crochet into the 2 remaining stitches. So, that's the first single crochet, the second single crochet, okay, so that's done. And finally, in the last round, so in the last round, now we should end up with 4 stitches. And now in the last round, we work 2 decreases. So that creates a nice tip. And that means we end up with 2 stitches in the end, which is, yeah, super tiny. Okay, so that's the first decrease. And now the most challenging one, decrease number 2. Done. So this is what the finished horns look like. The smaller one, which bends into this direction, and then the bigger one. Also again, with the smaller horn, you can kind of press it into the shape a bit. And now you can place them on the head of the moth. And I saw them onto the head, but that can be super hard since the horns are quite small. So alternatively, you can also use some glue and just glue them onto the head. Now we'll continue with the big wings first. So for the big wing, I used 3 different colors: a tip color, a main color, and a border color. The tip or detail color is completely optional, I would say, but I would recommend using a different color for the border because the contrast gives the wing a nicer look. Now we start with the contrast color, so the tip of the wing, and we start by working 6 stitches into a magic ring. So a magic ring of 6 stitches. So that's 1. I close the magic ring and I finish this round. So for the wing, I work in with finished rounds again. So basically I end each round with a slip stitch and a chain 1 to continue with the next round. You can again also work in continuous rounds. It doesn't really matter, it's just a preference thing. I just prefer working in finished rounds. Now I work a single crochet and an increase, and I repeat that 3 times. So now I have 6 stitches here, so that's a single crochet, increase, single crochet, increase, single crochet, increase, so that I end up with 9 stitches in total. Now and then I finish the round, and now I work 9 single crochets all around. So that's 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now we continue with round 4, and we start with 3 single crochets. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Then we work 3 increases. That's increase number 1, another increase, and the 3rd increase. And then 3 single crochets. That's 1, 2, and 3. For the next round, you want to single crochet all around. So that's 12 single crochets. Now I'm done with round 5. So I just worked 12 single crochets all around. And before closing this round or finishing this round, I switch to the main color, which will be black. To do that, I join my round by working a slip stitch, and then I chain 1 to continue the next round. Now we don't need the contrast color anymore, so I can cut it here and tuck all the threads into the tip of the wing. That makes it easier to continue. Now, in my main color, I continue with round 6, and I work 4 single crochets, 4 increases, and then another 4 single crochets. So right now we have 12 stitches here, and I work single crochet, single crochet, that's 4 single crochets. Now 4 increases, so that's the first one, second one, third one, and the last increase. And then another 4 single crochets, and then you're done with this round. For the next round, because now we should end up, since we increased 4 times, we should end up with 16 stitches. So for the next round, you just work 16 single crochets all around. Now I'm done with round 6 and 7. So for 6, I finished with the 4 single crochets, and then I worked 16 single crochets for round 7, and now I continue with round 8. And for round 8, you want to work 6 single crochets, then 4 increases, and then 6 single crochets. Okay, and that's it. Now for the next round, you work 20 single crochets all around. When you're done with round 9, so you've worked 20 single crochets all around, you can see that it slowly starts shaping into a wing. And And now we want to decrease again to achieve a sort of curve so that it gets a bit more narrow, and then we can attach it to the main body here. So we continue in round 10 with 8 single crochets, 2 decreases and 8 single crochets. So I work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I decrease 2 times using an invisible decrease. That's the first decrease, and then the second decrease, and then I finished the round with 8 single crochets instead. And then for the next round you do the same, but instead of 8 single crochets you work 7 single crochets, 2 decreases and 7 single crochets. And then you continue with the next round with 6 single crochets, 2 decreases, 6 single crochets, and so on. And you kind of repeat it until you reach round 15. So the last round should be 3 single crochets, 2 decreases and 3 single crochets. And eventually you'll end up with 8 stitches. So that's kind of our goal here. Now I'm done with round 14 and there's just one more round. And for round 15, as I've mentioned before, this is the last round. I work 3 single crochets, 2 decreases and 3 single crochets. That's 1, 2, 3, then an invisible decrease, another decrease, and 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. I close round 15, and now we are done with the main wing and we just need to add the border. Now that we are done with the main wing, we can add the border, and for that I'm using some white yarn. And depending on whether it's the left or the right wing, I attach the border yarn on a different side so that both borders face forward and look symmetrical. So assuming this is the left wing, I would attach the yarn here and work along the edge here. And on the right wing, it's the opposite. I attach it here and then work along the edge here. And then you end up with borders that face forward, and yeah, it just looks a bit better. I've attached the yarn and I can continue creating the border. So you kind of want to insert your hook in between the rounds, and at the edge of the wing you work single crochets until you reach the other end. And for the curve here, I work single crochet, like 3 single crochets into 1 stitch to create this curve and make it look a bit better. And you can do that here and here as well. Otherwise I would just work single crochets all around. So now I've reached the tip of the wing and I insert my hook here in the center of the magic ring, and I work 3 single crochets into the same stitch, cover the curve, and then I continue along the upper side of the wing. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Like sometimes if you depending on your tension and so on, it can be a bit hard to find the right space to insert your hook into. So this is a bit challenging. Now I'm almost done. Just one last single crochet, and at the end of the wing, like when you're done with the border, I insert my hook, like I insert my hook here, pull through, and now you're done. So I'm done. You can tuck the white yarn into the wing, or you can also weave in the ends. You will only need the black yarn to sew the wing onto the main body. For the small wing, I'm again using 3 different colors, and again I would say the detail color is optional. And yeah, we'll start by working 6 stitches into a magic ring again. So again, I'm using yellow as my contrast color, and I work 6 stitches into the magic ring. Now for the small wing, I also work in joined rounds. So I finish this round and chain 1 to start my next round, and then I work a single crochet, increase, single crochet, increase, single crochet, increase. That's 1, then another single crochet and increase, and then you should end up with 9 stitches in total. The last increase and closing round 2. Now we're done with round 2, and for round 3 we work 2 single crochets and an increase, and repeat that 3 times as well. So that's 1, 2, and then an increase, and repeat that 2 more times until you reach the end, and then we should end up with 12 stitches in total. Now I'm done with round 3, and I continue with 12 single crochets all around. So that's 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now before we continue with our next round, we switch to our main color, so black. So that means I join my round by inserting my hook here, pulling through the black yarn, working a slip stitch and chaining 1 to continue the next round, and then I'm done with round 4 and ready for round 5. Round 5 is an increase and 5 single crochets, and that's yeah, so basically I work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then I increase, and then I repeat that again, so another 5 single crochets and an increase. So that should result in 14 single crochets. And when you're done with this round, you can work 14 single crochets all around for round 6. So now we finish by working 5 single crochets and an increase, and then for the next round you work single crochets all around. Now we're done with round 6, and we can continue by shaping the small wing. So for round 7 we work a decrease and 5 single crochets, and do that 2 times. So basically we start decreasing now so that we achieve this shape here and curve it a bit so that it gets more narrow. So we decrease, so that's the first decrease, and then I simply work 5 single crochets. That's the second, third, fourth, and fifth, and then I decrease again, followed by another 5 single crochets, and then you are done with round 7. And for round 8 you basically repeat the same again. You decrease, but instead of 5 single crochets you work 4 single crochets. So there's 1 decrease and then 4 single crochets, and you repeat that again. So decrease, 4 single crochets 2 times. So this is what the finished round 8 looks like. And when you're done with that, you can continue working single crochets all around. So 10 single crochets all around in round 9. So we're done with round 9. So we've worked 10 single crochets all around. And now we can continue with round 10, which will be the last round. And for that, we start with a decrease. So I start with an invisible decrease here, followed by 3 single crochets. So that's 1, 2, and 3. A decrease, and work 3 single crochets until we reach the end of the round. That's the second single crochet, third one, and that's it. Now we're done with the small wing, and we can add the border again. For that I attached the white yarn, and again in between each round there should be some space to insert the hook and work a single crochet. And basically you want to work single crochets all around. Now that we've reached the tip of the wing, I insert my hook here in the center of the magic ring we started with, and I work 3 single crochets into the same stitch, and that results in a smoother curve. Kind of looks a bit nicer. And then I continue with single crochets along the other side of the edge. Now we are done with the smaller wing. Make 2 big wings and 2 small wings, and then you can sew them onto the main body like so. So basically the bigger wings are right next to the collar here, so that the collar aligns with the collar, and then the smaller wings are placed slightly behind the bigger wings but right next to them. So there's maybe a stitch in between the 2 wings, but other than that they're right next to each other. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and had fun making your own little moth, hopefully. And if anything was unclear or if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I'm always happy to help. And thanks again for watching. I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!